great to have my friends here, William and Roberto, with us. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to be talking about a topic which is the democratic seizure of the internet, the Brazilian internet. What do I mean by that? I mean that it doesn't matter whether it's a dictator or a parliament that takes over your rights. What we are seeing in Brazil and also in the United States is that sometimes democracy will take over your rights and try to legitimize this usurpation through laws. And that we should be worried about that. Because, of course, it's not government that grants you your liberty. It's exactly the opposite. Quite on the contrary, it's when you don't have intervention by government that you have liberty. So if you we start to think, like most of us think, that if we write laws to secure our rights, and that's going to make them safe, make them safe, this is probably a mistake. Because over time, the tendency, once the government starts regulating something, over time it tends to usurp more and more. And we've seen that in history in many instances. But I'm going to talk in a few moments about the infamous Marco Civil, or the Civil Rights Framework Law. But before that, let me state that I was born before the internet. I was born before the personal computer. I was born before video games, before the cell phone. I remember when, as far as video games, I remember when Pong was the first video game that I saw came about. It was ridiculous, like a, yeah, it was just a little dot. Yeah, and that, I think that was probably 1976, but I still remember that. And then after that, other video games like Atari started. And right after that, then the personal computer with Apple II. And I was lucky enough to have one of those computers and started working on computers. But, you know, everything, as you know, changed with the internet. The world is completely different with the internet. And as much as people my age would say that before that life was great, I don't think you should believe that. You know, it sucked. Because I was telling a story the other day. I was traveling through Europe, and then, you know, one city per day, basically. I was in Paris at this time, and I checked into a hotel with a friend, and then we went sightseeing. By the end of the day, I realized I didn't have the name of the hotel or the address. So I didn't know where to go back to. I had no idea. And I didn't know what to do. You don't have cell phones, what do you do? How do you communicate? Who do you talk to? So I was trying to get change to call Brazil from a public phone to try to reach somebody in my family, maybe they would know. And I went to a store and tried to change the money. The guy thought I was, you know, begging for money. Changer. Get the heck out of here. So, you know, life sucked. It was completely inefficient. The internet, as opposed to the real world in which we have borders, top-down rules, hierarchies, the internet is completely different. It's completely decentralized. As the CEO of Google said, Eric Schmidt, he said that the internet is the first thing built by humanity that humanity does not understand. It's the greatest experiment in anarchy we've ever had. And that's it. The internet is anarchy because it has rules. Of course, you have the international registers and how do you know, make the packets work, TCP, IP, etc. Has a lot of rules, but no government determines how the internet works. And that's the beauty of it. And that's how we get so much progress. And that's probably why the government wants to clamp down on that, because we are benefiting from this, and from some perspectives, this is conducive to movements such as the liberty movement, which I don't know if you know, but we depended a lot on Orkut to exist. And that's curious, but you know, the Brazilian liberty movement owes a lot to Orkut. So, of course, the government is interested in what we are doing with the internet, and as Jefferson said, you know, we're probably going to be witnessing a long train of abuses and usurpations. He was referring to you know, the British Crown with the stamp taxes and other taxes that the British Crown was imposing on the colonies, and you know, we are starting to see that in Brazil as far as the internet is concerned. Then, one of the main things the internet, in my opinion, helped is to decrease dramatically the publishing and distribution costs. So today, I may have right here, you know, a whole library of books completely for free in the Instituto Mises Brasil, which I preside. We make available all the books for free. You can buy the paper copies, but they're completely free. So this is completely different from how it was like a few hundred years ago, in which you know, you would have scribes transcribing books, and with any luck, they would do the job within a year to transcribe one single book, to copy one single book. So this is dramatically changed. There's a British writer called Arthur Clarke who said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And I completely agree with that, because when I first used, for example, I don't know if you know the app Shazam that recognizes songs, I couldn't believe it. I was in the middle of the bar and you know, pressed it, and it told me which music was that, which song was that. So that's amazing. And also Waze, I don't know if you guys use it here in Porto Alegre, but in São Paulo you have to use it, and it actually, yeah, it's amazing. And it avoided a probable crash that I would have, because it told me there was an object in the driveway, and after 500 meters, and yeah, actually there was, it was like a wood plank with nails, and I avoided an accident. So it's, you know, everything changed with the internet. And now, what the government just implemented in Brazil is what they call an internet constitution, right? And that's, you know, if you, they're saying that this is going to guarantee our rights. And I think if you draw a parallel also with the United States, when they became independent in 1976, the 13 colonies, they decided to write some sort of an agreement among them, and that was the Articles of Confederation. And in this agreement, they established a Congress. I don't think we need it. They established a Congress, which every state, every colony would be represented. But they didn't establish a central government at that point. Then a little bit later, like in 1989, if I'm not mistaken, they decided to amend the Articles of Confederation and establish a central government with you know, a chief executive, the president, a Supreme Court, centralized justice, and when they did that, I think they tried to do that, but guaranteeing the rights of the people, but they wouldn't expect that we were going to have a situation like today, in which I think the founding fathers would be very disappointed, because when you establish a central government, a central justice system, what you probably get over time is that they're going to be reinterpreting whatever was written over there, and amending the Constitution, and things like that. So at the time, Patrick Henry, who was one of the founders, said, you know, I smell a rat. He knew that when they were going to, you know, amend the Articles of Confederation, they were going to try to establish a central authority. And that I think, was probably a mistake. And after 200 years, we have a government which is completely different from what the founders would have liked. That is gigantic, that allows for things like mass surveillance, Patriot Act, and things like that. I think the Americans that are liberty lovers are probably disappointed with what's going on in the United States. But can the government censor the internet? That's a question that you know, a lot of people make. And I think you know, I'm a pessimist in that regard, because I think the government can. There was this president of the, I think it was the Electronic Frontier Foundation, I think, who said that the internet interprets censorship as damage and routes around it. This is a pretty nice sentence, but I don't believe in it. Because when the government decides that to make something illegal, you know, it's very difficult for you to try to avoid that and face whatever fines they decide to impose on you. For example, I was in Myanmar in 2011, and that was before the opening up of the country that they had since then. And what they had in Myanmar was an intranet. They had the firewall that isolated the country. So everything inside Burma, Myanmar, was censored. A friend of mine who was with me, at some point she was trying to use Facebook. You could use Facebook, the wall on Facebook, but you didn't have access to the inbox of the Facebook. And she put something saying she was in Birmania. And then she showed me her computer. What is this message? Her antivirus system said, a key logging software has just been installed in your computer. So she was using the internet and you know, key logging. And what's that? And I explained it. It records all the keys that you type and sends to the guy who installed the malicious software. And that was very scary. And also in Myanmar, at that time, I don't know if it has changed, but at that time you could only have an email with the government provider. So there was a cyber cafe in, you know, all corners, because people were trying to use proxy servers and etc. But there was a law in which all the cyber cafes had to send a print screen every 5 minutes of every session of everyone, so to the government. So, you know, how can you avoid censorship with a power like that? I'm not saying this is going to happen in Brazil, but I'm saying that if the government really wants to clamp down, are you going to face, you know, prison by becoming illegal and try to surf illegally? I wouldn't. I can tell you, I wouldn't face prison for trying to access Facebook or whatever. So I'm a pessimistic in that sense. I know a lot of people would not agree with me. For example, Jeffrey Tucker, I don't know if you know Jeffrey Tucker. He is a complete optimist. He thinks technology is going to change the world and etc. But I think the internet is just a platform. It can be used for good, it can be used for bad. In China, for example, you have, you know, what's called the 50-cent party. You know, the government would pay people, activists, to divert discussions online. So they're paid like 50 cents for every post they make. So I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical about how we can avoid regulations and laws and intrusions such as the civil rights framework. So what does this infamous law says? First of all, if you read the law, it's like in Article 2, it already starts regulating the fundamentals of the use of the internet. It says that you know, one of the fundamentals is freedom of speech. Okay, But it says it's also development of the personality. What's that? I don't know. Diversity and social ends. So it can be anything. And then Article 3, it regulates the principles of the use of the internet. It says you have to have accountability of the agents. They're talking about the providers, of course. They want to go after the big guys who make the connections with the internet. And by the way, just to explain just a little side note, the internet is not the same thing as the World Wide Web. The internet is the connection among the computers. That started like in the 60s. And the World Wide Web actually became mainstream like in 1995. And it's like an app that runs on the internet. So like the sites are apps that run on the internet. The World Wide Web is an app that runs on the internet. I remember when I went to study at Columbia Business School, early 90s, and that was before the World Wide Web. But there was already a killer application, which was email. So when I registered at Columbia, they already gave me an email. I had to buy a notebook, which was like 50 pounds. But I found the email, magic, because you would receive an email and you can read anytime you want, and then you send it to somebody, and then he can read anytime he wants. The only problem was I didn't have anybody to send any email to. Unless, except of course for my Brazilian friends, but then I already was talking to them. So, over there, the students. So, Article 4, going back to the law. Article 4, it regulates the objectives of the use. So we have the fundamentals, the principles, and now the objectives of the use. What are the objectives? To promote the right of access to all. Participation in the management of public affairs. That's what's written in the law. And then you go to Article 6, and it says, in the interpretation of this law, one should take into account the fundamentals, the principles, and the objectives, and the importance of the promotion of the human, economic, and social and cultural development. So it already says you have to take into account everything that we said before in interpreting the law. Then, it says in Article 7.2, rights of users, inviolability and confidentiality of your communications, except by court order. Then this is the democratic seizure, because by court order it can be any judge. In Brazil it can be, a judge from a small claims court. He can basically say, I want all your data, and they have to give you. And then the much talked about Article 9, which is net neutrality. What is net neutrality? It says the providers have the obligation to treat any packet of data isonomically, without discrimination. So you cannot pay to have faster access. It sounds fair, right? Why should anybody have any privilege to have faster access to some applications for video or for something else? You have to treat everybody equally. But think about it. For example, if you go to any airport in any regular country, you'd have something called the fast access, fast express, whatever. If you buy a business class ticket, if you're a businessman and you were in a rush always, you would go to the fast track. So that makes sense as well, right? But this law would, if applied to airports, would say you cannot have that, except for whatever its priority written on the law, right? Which is already also in here. If it's the police emergency, you can discriminate according to the law. And in Brazil, actually, they are trying to pass a law saying that you cannot have any fast track in the airports, which is amazing. So we have this ingrained mentality that you cannot have any discrimination whatsoever. If you pay more, you cannot benefit from that. In Miami, for example, they have like multi-lane roads, and sometimes 2 of the 5 roads are express lanes. you would pay like whatever, 25 cents per mile, and you have less traffic, and you pay for that. Again, this is discrimination, but it's not discrimination of a person, because a person who does not have much money, but if it's has an emergency to send someone to hospital, for example, would definitely use the express lane. But what net neutrality says is that you cannot have any sort of discrimination or any payment for faster access. You can pay for faster access, but you cannot pay differently, discriminate among people, or pay for different services faster access. But of course, you can have plans of speed, right? You can definitely have speed. You should still have that. But then, at the same article, which when it was on the lower chamber, the House of Representatives of Brazil, it had only this couplet that I just mentioned. You cannot discriminate. Then we went to the Senate. They added a paragraph that contradicts completely the couplet. It says you can discriminate. Yes, you can discriminate. They actually say that. You can discriminate so long as there are technical requisites to the proper provision of services. And of course, I understand that price is a technical requisite. So what they're saying is that, you can. So nothing changed. So nothing happened. We don't have net neutrality in Brazil, in my opinion. Right? Maybe somebody, as long as the provider specifies in the contract. You can say, oh, if you are paying more for video, you can have faster access to video. But I'm saying that, but this does not happen in practice. This law is like a solution in search of a problem, because this is not happening today. It's like when you say, for example, that a bar or a restaurant cannot discriminate. Even if you didn't have this law, we probably wouldn't have people discriminating in general. Maybe there might be a stupid guy that would do that, but he would lose the clients, and that would be short-sighted, and it would probably get corrected in the market. So we don't have that today, but anyway, they still allow for a discrimination at the end of the day. And then in paragraph 10, Article 10, in paragraph 2, they are transforming the providers, which are the ISP providers, in police agents of the government, because it says that they are obligated to collect and store all the connection data of users for 1 year. And then they say that administrative authorities, which is the police or the Ministério Público or any other administrative, not judges, can ask to extend this period at will. And the provider is explicitly prohibited of informing its customer that this is going on. So it's like I can almost hear the evil laughter of these guys that drafted this law. Like they're spying on us, and they want all the information. And of course, this is against international practices. No country, like the U.S. does not have any of that. They don't think this inhibits the persecution of criminals just because you don't have all the access data that the people have on the internet. They don't think that does, of course, they have other means to find criminals. You don't have to have that. And also, they say that administrative authorities can request at any time the personal information of the users, such as information on the parents of the user, address, tax ID, identification number, spouse, everything. They can ask at any time, it says in the law. And as far as fines, and this is absolutely mind-boggling, they say the government can fine up to 10% of the gross sales of the economic group. Economic group is like whatever the company has affiliation with. 10% of the gross sales of the last 12 months of the group for non-compliance. So they transformed, all the providers into agents of the government, and they can do basically anything. Article 13, collection and storage of data by providers, regulates everything: IPs, customer data, connection data, sites, etc. And Article 15, which I think is the worst article, it says that sites are obliged to collect and store IP and connection data for 6 months. First they were talking about the provider. Now they're talking about the sites. For example, Mrs. Brazil site. We have to collect and store IP connection data for 6 months. And the authorities can contact us and say that they want extension of the period. Not a judge, not a court order. Oh, the judge, yes, they can ask personally, and we have to comply. And also, finally, Article 19, any judge may request removal of content from any site before the verdict, including a small court judge. So the judge can just say, as a precautionary measure, I want you to take down that content. And I'll have to take down that content from the Mrs. Brazil site. So, this is completely crazy, this law, yeah.
And about the sites that are in other servers, in other countries,
they
will do it?
They regulate it, and they say, if you have anything to do with Brazil, we'll go after you. So you can say, for example, my institute, everything is offshore, exactly for that, yeah. But they will go after us, because we are here. They're saying they're coming after us. In the law, they say, if you have anything to do with Brazil...
This is the reason we have an army.
Huh?
That's why we have.
Didn't it say you have to have it here?
No, that did not pass.
That
did not pass. The service.
Yeah.
They wanted that provision to have all data hosted in Brazil, but that did not pass. But they're saying they're going after you, and you're here, so they're going after you. I'll have to comply in Mrs. Brazil if they want me to take any content down. So, and they talk a lot about, in Portuguese, the word is cidadania. It's like a social commitment. Everything is cidadania in this law. That's basically my worry. Of course, it's a crazy law. I think we have to be completely vigilant. We have to try to contain the government and revoke this law. But I'm pessimistic in the short term that we'll be able to do that, and we probably have to wait and see what how the government will behave over time. The way I interpret it is usually in the beginning the government won't do much, but with time they're going to take advantage of the power that they established with the law, and there are a lot of provisions saying that they're going to be supporting laws, supporting regulations, supporting regulations and laws that they're going to complement this law. So we don't know yet how this is going to work. For example, there's actually one of the articles who says that the president can issue an executive order to get information. The president, the person of the president, which is also completely crazy. So that's it. I'll open for questions then. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Helio. Questions now. João, do you want to?
I just wanted to add something.
Yep.
The thing about the website storing the data, the IP and the date, I guess was the date. That does not increase any kind of cost to the web, because it's already storage in the logs on the web server.
Yeah.
The only thing is maybe you have to extend the period of time that it goes to trash, like. And one thing I think you didn't mention is that before this Marco Civil, like the websites were responsible for user comments and posting,
Right.
and that's not
Yes.
valid anymore. So Before they could put your website down
Yeah.
completely just because of a comment of a person, and now they make a notification
Yes.
for you to take a.
Yeah, that's true. They actually said that. That's you know, a pro for the law, in which before it was not clear. We didn't have the courts didn't have any standard procedure. So if they asked you to take down content, because somebody posted a comment on, for example, Mrs. Brazil site, I would have to, and I'll be accountable for the comment as if I issued it. And that's, the law says that this is not valid anymore. As far as the first point you mentioned, that there is no cost, I completely agree, there's no cost. I already collect everything because I want to have all the data, because I want to.
Yeah,
Right? Because I want to use the
because the
Google
website
Analytics.
use like Google Analytics, so you,
No, I know,
if you
exactly.
use advertising,
I know,
they
but
can-
that's for me,
yeah.
right? That's for me. It's not for the government, right? I know it doesn't increase my cost, but now I have to make sure that I have that saved and stored, and if I
Otherwise-
don't have that, I may be fined by 10% of the economic code.
Yeah.
Okay, so and the provider will also be, I think, accountable for that. So this is crazy. Before I had the data, every site has its data because they want to. Now you have to save it and store it for the government.
And-
Actually, this cost your freedom.
Yeah, it's the cost of freedom. Exactly. Exactly. Good point.
There's
The invisible cost.
There's another thing about the prioritizing packets.
Yeah.
That's usually called traffic shaping. They call like there are some providers that we had some problems. We have still some providers like you cannot download torrents properly
Yeah.
because they prioritize YouTube and email and stuff, and you don't have a proper P2P download functionality. And that gives neutrality to the packets. I know there's this point that, okay, you can choose your provider, right? If you're not happy, you go to the other one. But the thing is, we live in a telecommunication lobby in Brazil. We don't have a choice, right? All companies do that, and you cannot choose the service. Like I don't want a packet prioritizing. I don't want traffic. They don't sell the service like that. None of them sells you a plan like that. So you don't like it, you
Yeah.
you don't have an internet if you don't like it.
Right. I'm not an expert in technology or anything like that. I'm just a curious guy about the internet. I don't know exactly how it works. This discrimination we talk about, torrents versus video, whatever. I'm not sure. But what I can say is that first of all, I agree with you that there are laws which don't allow the market to behave, right? But the way to solve this problem is not by creating additional provisions. It's by revoking whatever is preventing the companies from being competitive the way you mentioned. The fact that you don't like that you don't get a service you would like, that's a fact of life, right? Of course, some of the reason is because the government is intruding in the market. But the way to solve it is by removing those other laws and not trying to regulate how you as an ISP should run your business. Because then you create another problem. And this is socialism on the web. Like you have to treat everybody the same.
I'm not offending. I'm not offending at all. I'm very skeptic about this.
Right.
But I think you should be able to buy a service where the packets would be prioritized, but for videos or something. But I think you should have an open market so people could offer that kind of service. We don't have that.
I agree with you. But what we're saying, just to be clear, is that we should revoke the other laws that prevent the market from working.
Yeah.
But that's not democracy bill, which is another law on top of it. Yes,
I'll read yours first.
who's first?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes,
the Internet Constitution, which you referred to, was passed presumably in response to the revelations of Edward Snowden and the
Right.
NSA spying scandal and whatnot. But it seems like the government either unwittingly or perhaps intentionally has turned it in a way to socialize the internet, as you said. Is there really anything that the government of Brazil or any other government per se can do about the NSA's violation of internet privacy, not just for people living in the U.S., but for the entire World Wide Web? Is there really anything that can be done about it?
Yeah. You're mentioning something which is, of course, being discussed a lot, which is mass surveillance, right? And that's happening in the U.S., which is a shame, because the U.S., exactly as Juan Carlos was mentioning, the cradle of liberty. How can you have mass surveillance in a country which had in the Bill of Rights, that you cannot violate the confidentiality and the documentation of people, etc. They say they're not doing that on Americans, but we know that might not be true. Anybody who talks to a foreigner will then be recorded and have the same, be part of this mass vigilance. So this is definitely being discussed. That's even worse than Brazil, because in Brazil it's not mass surveillance, but it's mass judicial surveillance or administrative surveillance. Brazil is is on the top 3. I think it's the second place in the number of taking down of content by Google all over the world. So in Brazil, it's like about 600 to 700 content links down every year. And it's the largest in the world. And you say, but Brazil doesn't have mass surveillance. We respect the freedom of the internet because we have this even before the civil rights framework. We already had this democratic seizure of the internet, in which any court, any judge, any ministerial público officer can ask for the removal of content, for example, or your basic data. What can we do? I think I'm not sure because the U.S. government is sovereign, so it will only act in that respect if the people of the U.S. would protest against it. I'm not sure the U.S. is not drawn to pressure from the international countries to change their ways, right? So there is a strong movement of countries discussing that you should avoid mass surveillance. But I think the U.S. government will do what it will do, taking into account only the internal pressure of the people. So I'm not sure how is it today in the minds of people, but if this is going to be changing, it's because the media, the interest groups, etc., people are going to be protesting.
I mean, no, it's pretty tough in the States. I mean, about half of the people think that he's a hero. The other half want to hang him for treason. So I don't know. Public support's really not
There's
there.
a conflict.
And Congress is doing some cosmetic changes by saying, okay, the NSA won't store the data, but we'll pass it on to a third party and expect that to be somehow kosher and cool.
Since 2001, there is a very clear conflict between the First Amendment and the necessity to avoid another 2001, September 11th. So this is on the minds of people, and if people are not going to resolve that, it's going to continue. So I think at some point the Americans will have to make a decision on whether they want to go back to origins or still work based on fear. And that's not resolved yet. It may take a long time. It depends on numerous factors. Yeah. Actually, there's no.
Hi. Hi. Oh.
Yep. Yes, working.
So I just wanted to ask, do you believe that we could use Rothbard's view on human rights, that it's actually property rights on the internet also, instead of having a law like civil Marcos View.
Yeah.
You could have the use view as a page, a personal page, or a Facebook page as a personal property of the firm, of the person, and with that you can mitigate disputes between parties without having to have a law specifying that you can do this, and you have to respect that kind of free speech and things like that.
Well, I'm not sure I understand what you mean by Rothbardian property conception, but before the law, we had anarchy, if I may use the term in the dictionary sense without the central authority. We had anarchy in the internet, which means that you or your provider would be the owner of the pages or the structure. So and everything worked. So it was like this, and in most of the world, it's still like this. It's your or private property, or your provider private property, or Facebook private property. It's somebody's private property, and the law does not exactly change that yet. It's just the beginning of it.
It's a social use of the
Yeah, social use. I envision people suing a lot because it says all the things I said, the fundamentals, the adjectives, etc. So people will sue because I don't have right to access. So I want right to access. So this is going to take some time, but people, lawyers are going to start using that, defending that. So if we revoke the law, then we go back to I think a Rothbardian mechanism in which you have a lot of regulation, a lot. In the internet you have, all the rules, TCP, IP, and the domains, but it's private. It's decentralized. If you take down half of the internet survives also because it's resilient to attack. But if the government starts, manipulating it, then we have a problem.
May I respond to that point real quick? The legal justification that they're using now for this NSA spying is called the third-party doctrine. And it holds that because you voluntarily give your information to Facebook, for example, then the government goes to Facebook and says, give up this, well, I mean, it doesn't literally do that, but they give up the information to the government. But the point is that you voluntarily give that information to Facebook, and that is their legal justification. Now, obviously, I assume we would all disagree with that, but we also realize, hopefully, that governments do not recognize property rights. I mean, that's the basis of government, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, so yes, property rights, great concept, I'm all for it, but governments don't recognize it.
Yeah. And I remember in your speech the other day, you mentioned Snowden as a whistleblower, and I think that's the proper term, because he was denouncing illegal activities by the government. The leaker was, I think, Bradley Manning. I don't know if he was the guy or not, because
Chelsea.
Chelsea, yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, if the government is doing something illegal and somebody tells it, this guy should be a hero. And actually, this was how the U.S. Used to think before. I think on the Pentagon Papers and Watergate, and that was, of course, the government tried to go after the guys that leaked, but at the end of the day, these guys were considered heroes. And this is not happening anymore, which is a shame. I think this issue of fiduciary duty, the confidentiality, does not work for. You should always, comply with that, except if the government is doing something which is illegal or unconstitutional. So then, the fiduciary duty of the employee is towards the people, not towards the government. And that, I think, this whole doctrine is changed. Yep.
I think we had a question here first.
Yep.
No, now after no, I didn't think it. I think after his explanation, I understand why the United States is not that free as it used to be. because they try to convince people that, you know, you give your private information to the government and you'll be doing something for the society. Instead, it's the government that is breaking your right to be free. You know, it's very, not naive, but how do you say, it's that from devil, sort of something from devil. And the point I wanted to make before, towards your explanation, I think it's pretty reasonable to say that the government is creating this kind of law so that they have the jurisprudence. If somebody does something that goes against the interest of the government, they will have a reason to sue or to take that content out of the internet. And I think that's pretty obvious that the government is afraid of the power that the internet has in terms of making a collectiveness, you know, making people act together in order to have something. I think it's impossible to think that 1 million people went out in Rio de Janeiro and other things like that if internet wasn't available to communicate with them. So I think there is an intrinsic power in this communication mean, and that the government is afraid of that and is trying to defend before it grows. Because nowadays we have in Brazil still have people that don't even know how to read. So before internet grows to the point where it will move all the country, it will take some years. But the government has already created this law, so when I do something that goes against the government, you do or we do, they will say, look, it's written in the law 10 years ago.
I agree completely. I think that you understand the reasons behind it. But amazingly, I think the rest of the world doesn't. One counsel was telling me that you know, what they're saying abroad is that this is the Brazilian law is a benchmark law, it's a model law. So I think that, you know, naivety is around the world.
Yeah.
I think we can have one more question.
In your opinion, what would be the economic outcome of the net neutrality, the economic results, the interface in the market by the government?
Well, the way it's written, and this is still to be verified, is that we don't have net neutrality because of the first paragraph that comes after Article 9, which through its language, I think it contradicts neutrality totally. But let's think you know, the hypothesis that then there is going to be a complementary law which reestablishes neutrality. And I think this is, like Roberto was saying, it's like an invisible cost that you cannot see. It's the cost of liberty. Because you cannot see, it's easy for the government to be doing things like that. You cannot see what was not done because of government intervention. You cannot see the bridges which were not built. You cannot see the conferences that were not made. You cannot see the happiness that we didn't have. So it's an invisible cost. You have to imagine it because it's a counterfactual world. But I think when it's related to liberty, the cost is immense.
Thank you, Helio.